Great. Okay, let's get going. So welcome to Office Hours here at CloseAbility Academy. My name is Kevin Ra. I'm one of the 4 founders here at CloseAbility. I am also the inventor of the CloseAbility software and the platform on which it sits. We call that the partial revenue platform because you use it to get money from land. So I'm super pumped about today's lesson. So before I get into it, let's give you a little bit of my background. So I started as a real estate investor in July of 1999, 26 years as an investor. I've personally bought and sold over 300 properties. And unlike most people who say that, I actually have the deeds to prove it. Any of you attorneys or agents out there want to challenge me on that, send me an email, info@closeability.io, and we will send you a Google Drive with the 300 deeds to the properties that I have bought and sold, so that you know that these workflows that I teach actually have been derived from deals that actually closed. And not only did they close, they were stamped by major title insurance companies to show compliance with the generally accepted practices and principles of the real estate and legal industries. In addition to that, I also was a consultant, escrow officer, examiner on over 3,500 deals that closed in my career. So I have closed roughly 4,000 transactions in my career, and all of them were distressed transactions. So I've been in the distress space now for 26 years. So that's who I am. That's what we do. That's what we offer. And this series, Office Hours, is open to agents and attorneys. There are some exceptions to that. For example, we do allow third-year law students in, and we occasionally do allow unlicensed investors in, assuming that they have allowed us to partner them with a licensed agent, so that we don't have any unlicensed activity on our platform. So now that we've done that house cleaning, let's get into today's lesson. So today's lesson, let me share my screen. Oh, and you've got the slide deck. Okay, great. So, I always forget Ann on the call with us. She is the executive assistant to our entire C-suite here at CloseAbility, and she's the person that runs the slide decks on these videos. All right, so today's lesson, treasure or trash. Know if your distressed real estate leads are treasure or trash before you spend 1 minute working on a transaction. Those of you who have hung around me in the academy for the last few months have heard me tell the story over and over again, and I'll keep telling it because that's the basis for CloseAbility. When you are working in the real estate industry, now I'm talking about the 90% of deals that are not distressed, okay? You do not need an analytics platform to take a look at your deals before you start working on them, right? Person selling the house for 500, they owe 300. Everybody with an equitable interest is getting paid. They have no title issues. All of your decision makers are all lined up and ready to go. Everybody's voted yes. Your seller has agreed to sell. Your buyer has agreed to buy. Your buyer's appraiser has given you the value that you need. Your buyer's loan officer has given, turned all the documents into underwriting. Everything's approved. You've pulled title. Everything is clear. That's how 90% of real estate transactions work, right? We do not work in that niche. We work in the other 10% where you are working on deals either as an investor, as an agent working with a buyer, or the listing agent. And in the 10% of the deals that we work on, you've had someone die without a will, leave a house to 3 kids. The 3 kids haven't talked to each other in 3 years or more, right? And mom took out a mortgage before she died. The 3 kids don't know about it. You know, the mortgage didn't get paid because no one knew there was a mortgage. This is where we're working. This is the niche that we're working in, okay? And in the niche that we're working in, your sellers come into these transactions with a whole lot of things going on. And the reason we invented CloseAbility, people have heard me tell the story a million times before. So as an investor, I ran Pipedrive CRM, and I used direct mail as my marketing source or referrals from attorneys, mostly probate attorneys. So my marketing was establishing relationships with probate attorneys or direct mail to distressed sellers. And that those two marketing channels, the partnerships and the direct mail, allowed me to generate a tremendous amount of leads. I got very, very good at generating incoming distressed seller leads. Okay. And the better I got at it, that did not necessarily translate to better income, right? So at one point, my direct mail response rate was 36%. I had most of the large probate attorneys, especially the ones that work with nursing homes, sending me transactions. And as my lead volume increased, my income did not increase accordingly. So we got to figure out what the problem is. So that's why CloseAbility was invented, because what I discovered as an investor and what any agent or investor or attorney that works in this distressed space is going to discover if they haven't already. And if you've been in this space for a long time, you've already discovered this. You just didn't know what to do about it. So one of our agents, Debbie, down in South Florida, Debbie Pinero, she's a whiz at distressed real estate. And before CloseAbility, she had all these checklists and, you know, all these different things that she would go through just to try to vet the deals as they came in the door. So she wasn't wasting her time working on deals that wouldn't close or that would close but wouldn't pay, you know, what she wanted to make. And so that is basically how this business has been done since the beginning of time, especially since the Great Depression, when, you know, the FHA was invented and mortgages, you know, people getting mortgages, you know, that became the commonplace as to how people purchased homes, purchase money mortgages. And so because you have purchase money mortgages being originated at a higher rate than ever, then it also follows that foreclosures and loss mitigation and short sales would also go up, because if you give more people money, then it's going to increase the amount of people who cannot pay. And so the state of the art for analyzing distressed deals before CloseAbility for the last 100 years has been hope and pray, spreadsheets, checklists. Okay, none of that's automated, and none of that is going to keep up with things in real time, right, as the deal goes. So that's where CloseAbility sits. CloseAbility protects your CRM from deals that will not close. I'm going to say that again. CloseAbility protects your CRM from deals that will not close. Because if you're going to scale in the distressed space, I'm having trouble talking today. If you're going to scale in the distressed space, then that means you're going to deal with more distressed sellers. And as you deal with more distressed sellers, you're going to have a way to figure out which of these sellers I should be dealing with and why, and which one I shouldn't be dealing with and why, right? And so that's what we're going to go over today. The direct mail response rate in the United States is 0.5%. I got my direct mail response rate up to 36%. Well, congratulations. My income didn't go up 720%. So my direct mail response rate went up 720%, and my gross income went up 300%, right? So there is, and that was just in the first year. After that, it became even more difficult to I was never able to get a consistent 300% year over year. I got 300% the first year because I went from no system to a system. And then after that, my income just plateaued, right? So how do we get through that? That's what we're going to go over today, okay? So treasure or trash. How to figure out, and I love the way our designers set up this slide, because you'll notice one box full of gold and an identical box with nothing. And that is the perfect microcosm for how the distressed real estate business works. Feast or famine. You either make a whole bunch of money or you don't make any. And the problem is you got to know which one of those two treasure chests your deals need to go in, and you need to know why, and you need to know fast. Okay, so great. And let's get going. Next slide. So, how CloseAbility helped an attorney and agent close an impossible to close transaction. So, those of you who are new to the academy, we pioneered what's called closed transaction-based real estate learning. What does that mean? It means that every workflow, every lesson in CloseAbility has one or more filed deeds attached to it. Those deeds stamped by a major title insurance company, Chicago, Old Republic, First American. There may have been some over the years that I don't remember, but the vast majority, Old Republican, First American, and then there was one period where we used Chicago title. That's a whole different story for a different day, but I don't recommend using them. So this particular transaction we're looking at is a transaction where a woman had died and didn't have a will, left a property to two children that should have been free and clear. Problem is, right before she died, she incurred some medical expenses, and the Medicaid did not get paid for those medical expenses, so they wound up putting a lien on her house. So they went into probate thinking they had a free and clear house that they were inherited. Turned out the house was actually underwater because the lien from Medicaid was extremely high, and the property happened to be in an area where the values were not extremely high. So a very, very sad situation, but happens all the time. Anybody who's worked in the nursing home space, the Medicaid space, probate, whether it be estate, guardianship, have seen this happen a million times. You can't be in this niche of the industry and not see this happen a million times. Okay, next slide, Ann. Okay, so biggest mistake that investors, agents, attorneys, biggest mistake that you make in the distress space is you have some type of marketing effort. That marketing effort brings in clients, and the first thing you do, if you're a realtor or an investor, first thing you do, right into your CRM. Oh, I got a deal. If you're an attorney, oh, great. Let's set up a consultation. I'm going to sit through an hour consultation and take all these notes, right? I'm going to fill out God knows how many probate documents. I'm going to get the paid funeral bill. I'm going to get any claims from any creditors. I'm going to send the request to Medicaid and Medicare to see if there are any outstanding bills, right? You go through your workflow, and the problem is, again, that workflow is fine for 90% of real estate transactions. The problem with most of those transactions, especially if you're coming in as a buyer's agent working with investors, or if you're an agent who's also an investor and you're coming into the transaction as an investor, the problem is most of those transactions have no immediate upside, right? Now, we do teach Audience Igniter, where we teach you guys how to use building permits and death records and other public records to find transactions that you can do where the seller is getting what they want, but you as an investor or you as a buyer's agent working with investors, there's still upside to realize immediate value. There are those transactions, but the deeper the distress, the higher the profits. That's the rule that I live by. And if I go and look over the 300 properties that I bought and sold as an investor, if you show me how much money I made, I can tell you a very complicated, detailed, intricate story of a bunch of hoops that I had to jump around, sending notaries to prisons, all types of crazy stuff I had to do to make those transactions close, because the deeper the distress, the higher the profit. And so if you want to work deep distress to get high yields, then you have to stop and understand how to analyze. So the easy way to remember this is that in the non-distress space, you get a lead, you go. In the distress space, you get a lead, you stop, because you've got to make sure that you're not getting ready to take a real estate license or a law license, which is a license to print money, and use that license to work on a deal that's not going to close, and that's going to pay $0 and 0 cents an hour, right? Total waste of time. You can spend that time with your family. You can spend that time at the gym. You can get a part-time job at Taco Bell and make more than $0 and 0 cents an hour. So we don't want those deals. So in the distress space, we get a lead, we stop because we've got to do some analysis. And those of you in the academy, or anybody, the short sale igniter training, where we teach how we do the analysis, the co-op score analysis. I won't get into that in this video because it's so detailed, but if you send us an email, info@closeability.io, and you're a licensed attorney or real estate agent, or you're in law school, then send us that information as well, and then we will send you that training. It doesn't cost anything. I think it's about 45 minutes, but it will teach you how we go into the analysis of with the co-op score, of understanding who needs to cooperate and what we need to do to get their cooperation, and what the deal is going to look like if we do, and what it's going to look like if we don't. And those of you that are using the CloseAbility software, obviously you just screenshot us the purchase agreement or listing agreement. We'll put it through the system. Once we get to your order, all of that will be done in 540 milliseconds and be right back in your email. Okay, next slide, Ann. All right, so excuse me, that's my Cleveland cough. This time of year we cough in Cleveland. The temperatures are crazy. So now that we've stopped and done our analysis, now the question is, do we go? Okay, so the CloseAbility platform, for those of you on our platform using the software, by the way, Jason Mustin, I'm sorry, Jason, unmute yourself or pronounce your last name for me because I don't want to mess it up. Okay. Well, once he unmutes himself, I'll call back on him. So Jason is here. Jason is new, coming in from Southern California, the San Diego area. Happens to be where my father was stationed when he was in the military, so I'm a little bit familiar with it. I have a friend who lives out there. So now that we've stopped, now we got to go. When do we go? In my portfolio and my own deals, I don't go until the CloseAbility score, which is the score that tells me the probability that the deal is going to close. I don't go until my CloseAbility score is 80% or higher. So if I have 100 leads come into my system, CloseAbility is going to score them all. The ones that score 80% or higher are the ones I'm going to work on. Oh, there we go. Jason, say hello.
Hello.
Great. Nice to have you, Jason. First time on a call.
Yeah.
Jason, I've been talking all week. He's getting ready to come in and work with Candace Garrett in Dallas, and Debbie Pinero in South Florida, and Cassie Wilson from Red Raven Realty in Columbus, Ohio, getting ready to come in and be one of our agents on our platform. So we go. So we stop when we get the lead, we analyze it, and then we go. When the system tells us going is going to equal money, right? We don't do this business to practice. So filling up your pipeline with a bunch of distressed deals, not having a way to analyze them, and then not having workflows that you could then apply to those distressed deals, knowing those workflows have closed deals before, that's a serious problem in the distressed space. It's going to cause you to work on what we call the unclosables, which are a bunch of deals that are never going to close, or they are going to close, but the amount of time and effort that you put into the deal compared to how much money you're going to make and all the time you could have spent working on other deals, the juice is not going to be worth the squeeze. Okay? Next slide, Ann. All right. So this particular transaction, I'm sorry. Let's back up. The transaction that I thought this training was about was the lady I told you about with the Medicaid lien. My bad. This transaction, it's actually about, so, I hate to go over time here, but sometimes I just have to tell the background story because, again, the deeper the distress, the deeper the profits, or the higher the profits. So this transaction is 4475 West 58th Street. And the thing about this transaction is I as an investor owned 4471 West 58th Street, which was the house next to this. So this was a transaction that we brought in off of direct mail. We made $54,000 off this transaction. And funny story there, we actually only made $46,000 off the transaction, but we wound up making 54 in total because we had an investor put down an $8,000 deposit and flake and have to give up their deposit. So $54,000 we made off this transaction. So we had to do some construction to that property. So while we were doing the construction, the councilman for this ward shows up at the house and goes, yeah, you guys are doing really, really nice on this property, but the one next door has been a problem just as long as the one that you're working on. And man, if you could do something about it, myself, the community, we'd be very grateful. So we looked into it. It turns out the homeowner had died. She had no husband and no children, and her only heir was a brother, and her brother was mentally incapacitated and was a ward of the court, which means he could not make his own decision. The state had appointed a guardian ad litem to handle his affairs. And when the lady passed away, she had a mortgage to Wells Fargo. The house sat there for years. The mortgage never got paid. It eventually went into foreclosure, and now the house is underwater. So you have to do a short sale, a guardianship, and an estate all on one property in order to get it closed. Deep distress, right? And so what we did was, we told the council, we said, look, we made a lot of money off of this house next door, and it would behoove us to help you with this house, because when people come to buy our house, we don't want this house sitting there next to it. It's going to make it harder to sell our house. On top of that, one of my high school teachers lived in the house next to that one, and he also wanted me to do something about it. And this one of my favorite teachers in high school, I couldn't say no to him. So I said, okay, we'll see if we can do something with this one. So what wound up happening is we went and met with the attorney who was over the brother's estate and asked him, what would you want out of the deal if we tried to do something with the sister's house? He said, my client we have no clue how we're going to bury him when he passes away. So if you could just get a funeral policy out of this transaction for us, that would be fantastic. We'd love it. And I happen to have a crazy story. I went to high school with 4 young men. I went to all boys school, Cleveland Benedictine, here in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to high school with 4 young men whose parents own nursing homes here in Cleveland. Don't ask me how. I guess I was being set up for later success, because when it comes to probate, I know all the nursing home owners because I went to school with all their kids. So I called one of my buddies and I said, hey, how much would an inexpensive policy be? And so he gave me a price. I said, okay, I'm going to sell this house and we're going to redirect some of the money to you because that's what the guardian ad litem wants for him to participate. Great. So those of you who understand our co-op score framework, Wells Fargo had to participate and say, yes, we'll do the deal. So now I got to do a short sale. The probate court had to participate twice because they had jurisdiction over an estate and a guardianship, both of which had to be put through the probate court to get the approval, right? And so we were able to get all of those parties to cooperate, and we put the house on the market and got the highest offer, and Wells Fargo said, okay, obviously in a short sale, the majority of your proceeds are going to the first lien holder. Well, like we teach in the academy, if you know how to write variances, you can go outside of short sale guidelines. So this particular loan, So this particular loan happened to be an FHA mortgage. So what did we do? We wrote a variance request, right? And for those of you who don't know how to write variance requests, it took me 20 years to learn how to master it. Well, let's say about 18 years. So you can go through the 18 years like I did, or you can simply plug into our CloseAbility platform, join the academy, and the software writes the variances for you. You just tell it what the situation is. So we told CloseAbility, okay, this is the situation. We got probate lawyers that have to get paid. We have a funeral that has to get paid for. We have a brother who has to inherit a house who's mentally incapacitated. So his guardian ad litem is going to have to work with us. He's going to have to get paid for his time. So what we did, we wrote a variance and submitted it to Wells Fargo, who then submitted it to FHA, and we were able to get it approved. So this is what we call, this deal is unclosable, right? That's what most agents and most investors and most title companies would say. No, not unclosable, difficult, but not unclosable at all. In fact, it's quite closable. You just have to have a workflow. In this case, the workflow had to include writing a variance to the FHA to get this special approval, because the amount of money the servicer was going to collect on behalf of the FHA from the short sale was lower than the threshold, which at that time, 88%. So we had to write a variance. We submitted it to FHA. We got it approved, took the short sale approval back to the court, now hired our listing agent, right? That's where you CloseAbility agents come in. Here's a listing opportunity now for a property that outside of CloseAbility has a snowball's chance in hell of closing. Inside of CloseAbility, it had an 80% chance or higher of closing, or we wouldn't have worked on it. So we get the deal listed, get the property sold, and that's what you see on your screen. So that was the background for this particular slide. So the property sells. So Marcella Floyd was the deceased person. So we had to probate her estate. And then her estate was able to then sell the properties to an investor. So that deal closed 9/11/2024, $112,000. You want the slide deck? info@closeability.io. We'll send it to you. So next slide. Sorry. So investor buys the house for $112,500, does a little work to it. They were able to then resell it for $182,500. So again, and I say this all the time, anybody that wants to challenge the impact that real estate wholesalers and investors have on the market, we put more into the community than any other group of people. And this is an example. The house can sit there and rot and wait to go to the sheriff's sale, which in Ohio could take years, does take years, or a real estate wholesaler, in this case me, who has wholesale workflows, can get into the transaction. And in this case, I wasn't the principal. I gave that workflow to the probate attorney, and he was able to then get to the point where we could hand it to a realtor. And once we handed it to the realtor, now guess what? It's just like any other deal at that point, right? Once your title is clear or known to be clearable, now it's just like any other deal. But there's a period, excuse me, but there's a period, that stop-go period, where it's not like any other deal. And those of you who are in the audience at Niter Training, we teach you guys to make sure the deals are closable in the marketing stage, so that homeowners that own properties you'll never be able to close don't even come into your pipeline. You eliminate marketing to those homeowners in the beginning, and you take the money you would have wasted marketing to them, and you market to homeowners who you could actually close, right? Which means instead of sending a postcard, because that's what your budget is, which no one's going to look at, now I can send distressed sellers certified mail, priority mail. I can send it by courier. I'm giving you some of my secrets. That's why the direct mail response rate is so high, because the mail piece I'm going to send you, you're not going to ignore. And if I got to spend $30, $40, $50, $60 delivering my mail pieces to you, I have no problem with that, because the Igniter has already told me that you should be in my audience, because if you come forward, I'm going to stop, analyze, then I'm going to go, then I'm going to close, then I'm going to get paid. And then I can take some of that money for myself, and I can reinvest back into the next mailing and do it again. So 182,500 is what this property, and I know some of you guys, Jason, California, Debbie, so the agents we work with, I know that there are no properties in your area that sell for these cheap prices. So for those of you who don't understand, we have a for-profit land bank we run here in Cleveland called the Abandoned Homes Project. And we test these workflows here in Cleveland. That way, when we roll them out to you guys in those other cities, we know they actually work. We know the title insurance companies are going to insure the deals. So we know that these aren't the sale prices that you guys are used to seeing, right? But the fact of the matter is the underlying reasons that that make these deals distressed. In this case, somebody died and had only one heir who was incapacitated. That can happen anywhere. So when we run that workflow, right? So in this case, acquire, but in order to acquire a probate, two probates, estate guardianship, acquisition, listing, acquisition by investor, investor fix up, and then resell. So that's the workflow here. If you're a real estate agent, or I should say the agent that was involved in this transaction, there's 4 potential transaction sides there, right? Because first, they were the listing agent from the probate listing, which gave them an opportunity if they could find a buyer or had a buyer to be dual agent. And then now their investor client fixes up the property and lists it for sale, which gives them another opportunity to be dual agent. So even on $182,000, if you add the two, there was actually $300,000 in transaction flow here. And at 6%, let's say, 6% of 300,000 was $18,000. So there was the potential for $18,000 to be made from this particular transaction as a real estate agent. So not bad. But the other thing it does is if you're the buyer's agent and you're working with investors and you can secure deals like this, it shows your investor clients that they need to spend more time paying attention to what you're doing and possibly even come in and make some investments into advertising and marketing, because you're showing them that you can source, manage, and close transactions that your competitors can't, right? Your competitors, one, would not have seen it until it hit the foreclosure where everybody would have seen it. And then even if they saw it, most people would not have been able to close this transaction, right? So there is a ton of upside opportunity in these properties to get paid multiple times, right? And we call that expansion revenue. That means my marketing brought in a lead, and then I'm going to not only make money off that lead, but I'm going to find other ways to make revenue off that lead. I'm going to expand the revenue generation opportunities from one single lead. That also doesn't include, because you're the listing agent here, all of the unrepresented buyers that can come down the pipeline that you can then turn into clients. And the same if you're an attorney, turn into clients, right? And if you're an attorney, like the attorney in this case, this is a great case study that you can show other families that need probate help as to why they should be working with you. I can't imagine a better case study for this attorney than being able to show this slide deck and show that he was involved and got the deal closed. All right. All right, Ann, great. Next slide. All right. Those of you in the academy, I know you get sick of seeing this, but this is kind of like AA, where the meetings for the newcomers. If you don't stop, when you have incoming distress leads and you put the leads into your CRM with no analysis whatsoever, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a bunch of leads in your system, and as you try to get those leads from an incoming lead to a closed deal, your pipeline is going to bottleneck, right? You will have a bunch of deals in your pipeline. You will not make more money in the same, in relation to how you bring in more deals. You're not going to make more money, right? Your income is not going to go up proportionally to your lead gen, not in the distress space. In the regular space, absolutely it will. If you're going to work in the distress space, no, because it ain't just about lead gen. It's about the right lead gen. And sometimes you don't know what the right workflow is until that homeowner has stepped into your system, but you got to be able to figure out what the right workflow is right away. Excuse me. Good example. Realtors get short sale leads and they send over a listing agreement. Great. Not a bad idea because you want to secure the listing before the homeowner goes with someone else. So great. Then what do you do after that? So you get the listing agreement back and you actually list the property, you put it for sale. Yeah, you might want an analysis at that point. Because if there are bottlenecks down the road, you kind of want to know if they are now, right? You don't want to deal with them after you get to the bottleneck, especially if whatever is causing the bottleneck is going to be fatal to the transaction closing. You definitely want to know about that before you start spending time, money, effort, energy on the transaction. Next slide. Okay, so anybody wants the slide deck, we'll send it out. I won't go over these for time reasons, but challenge solution. So this will explain what the challenges were and what the solutions were. Next slide. And then this is a testimonial from the real estate agent from the attorney who was involved in this transaction. He's done many transactions with us. His father-in-law, who was actually the attorney of record on this case, is a good close friend of mine. And we have closed many, many transactions together over the years because his main business was working with nursing homes, trying to collect debts that were owed to nursing homes when people passed away. And that was my space. You've heard me say this before. So of the 300 properties, 60% involved probate and family law, which was right up my alley because I used to be a probate and family law paralegal before I started doing real estate. So 60% of my transactions came through probate family law attorneys and 40% came through direct mail. And there were some sprinkled in there from bankruptcy attorneys, some general practice attorneys, but very few and far between. It was either probate or it was direct mail. And then a lot of the homeowners that came into my funnel from my direct mail campaigns were bringing probate issues with them. So that's why probate is the overwhelming majority of the deals that I've closed, because they either came from probate attorneys. At some point, even the probate court started asking me to get involved in very complicated transactions, or they came from direct mail. But because I was using Audience Igniter, I knew I was marketing to people that had probate and family law issues, and I knew that I could solve those issues once they came into the pipeline. So it was no big deal. Next slide. Great. So results of this particular case study. Next slide, Ann. Okay. And then this is actually the lesson for Tuesday's office hours. So I'll stop here. I just wanted to give a background of what some of these slides were in case any of you asked for the deck and we send it. You'd have a background for what the slides meant. So on Tuesday, we're going to come right back to this same deal, right back to the slide deck. And what we're going to do is, so the closability score is a combination of a set of sub-scores. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about those sub-scores and why they're important to the transaction. So quick teaser, quick hint, time to live. What's the time to live? So in the IT world where I live now, the time to live is if I send a request to, let's say, IBM.com, how long do I want my browser to wait for IBM.com to fulfill that request before I give up? That's the time to live. Well, in a real estate perspective, distressed real estate perspective, the time to live is how long I have to close this deal before something happens that the seller can't control that takes ownership of the property away from them. Okay. So the most common example is a foreclosure. If a bank files a foreclosure today and CloseAbility is telling me, okay, in that state, in that county, the average foreclosure takes 12 months. Okay. The time to live is 12 months. I've got 12 months to get in here, get the seller to work with me, get a short sale done, or if the property's not underwater, get the listing, get it sold. And if I don't do that in 12 months, the property's going to go to sheriff's sale and the seller will no longer own it. So my time to live will expire. Now, one of the things CloseAbility does is not just tell you the time to live, but it also looks for ways to extend the time to live, right? For example, the homeowner may file something with the court saying, hey, the property's in foreclosure, can't afford to keep it, I'm planning on selling. Here's a copy of a listing agreement. I've gone out, hired a licensed realtor to sell the property. If you could just give me 2 extra months to sell the property so it doesn't trash my credit completely, I would appreciate it. There are very few judges that won't allow that extra few months, and there are very few banks that will oppose that. And if it's an FHA or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, in a lot of instances, the bank can oppose it. They actually have to work with you because there is a requirement. If the homeowner wants loss mitigation help, then it has to be provided. So that's just a very common example of knowing the time to live, why it's important, and why I eventually will do some lessons on the properties that we bought and sold that had already gone to sheriff's sale, but the sale hadn't been confirmed by the court. So in that period, I still have time to live. Now, in Ohio, sheriff's sales are confirmed 8 days after the property sold at auction. So it sells at auction on Monday, which means you normally have to the following Tuesday if it's a bank foreclosure. But hey, 8 days is 8 days. If I can make a deal in 8 days, then it's enough time to live for me to make the deal. But I can also go get an attorney and file a motion to extend the confirmation of sale date and ask a court not to confirm a sale for 30 days and explain why. Most courts grant that. So there's an example of I've got 8 days, but if I go get an attorney, now I've got 38 days. Well, if that attorney is going to charge me a couple $100 and I think I can close this deal, I'm more than happy to pay that few $100 for them to prepare that pleading and file. They can enter a limited appearance. I'm more than happy to pay that money to get an extra 30 days to close my deal. So we'll go over these next week, and I'm going to go ahead and end today's videos for today. The newcomer on the call, Jason. Jason, thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around. I don't know if your audio is still working, but did you have any questions? Okay. I think Jason might be having some audio problems, and so send him an email. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's office hours. And any agent, any question, anybody watching the live stream, Instagram, YouTube, you have any questions, info@closeability.io. Send your questions, comments, concerns, and we will be more than happy to deal with them. See you next week. Tuesday, noon, our next office hour session. We'll go over this. In the meantime, close more deals, make more money, and have time for what matters. I wish you all the best of luck, and we're here to help you with any of your deals. If you need us, just send us an email.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Yep. Thank you, Ann.